I'm wounded 4th month, I'm the battalion's Komsomor. How many attacks? And I'm alive. People might wonder, I'm very lucky, aren't I? After the war, I never won a lottery ticket except for 1 ruble, and then neither a bullet nor a bayonet could take me. Am I really happy? I think I am happy. The deep content of the soul of a soldier of the great patriotic war is very interesting. If each of us, the frontline soldiers, is called for frankness, some confessions may seem naive, funny even. I, for example, was seriously afraid that if I died, our motherland would die. When I was wounded behind the Dnieper River near Znamenka on November 28, 1943, I was afraid. How will it be without me now? Who will fight if I am seriously wounded? Of course, it was naive, but it was this naive fear that I could not get rid of for the first time. And only later, when our territory was liberated without me, when we entered Berlin without my participation, I laughed at myself for my arrogance. But even now I still believe that my philosophy was correct. Every Soviet man must consider himself responsible for the fate of the entire country. Only in this way will we achieve our great and major victory. After the operation on the Island of Death, about October 20th, 1943, our 66th Guards Division in the area of the villages of Kutsevolovka and Depievka easily crossed the Dnieper on a pontoon bridge, from the left bank to the right bank, where a giant bridgehead had already been created for the development of offensive battles for right bank Ukraine. The replenishment this time was not quite ordinary. In the shortest period of time, from the day of liberation, military commissions of Poltava region mobilized all the population capable of possessing weapons. These were mostly volunteers who had endured the horrors of 2 years of fascist occupation. The new replenishment arrived in their civilian clothes, and the regiment in those days looked like a large partisan detachment. We jokingly nicknamed Poltavans corn crackers. Our bridgehead on the map looked like a wedge, which its tip of 65 kilometers reached in the west to Piatikatok, and the width of the base was 15 to 20 kilometers. The division occupied its section of the front line and, with fighting, moved towards the town of Znamenka, Kirovograd region. The fascists fiercely counterattacked. At one of the sites near Znamenka, we had to beat the Germans out of the same trenches twice during one day. When we beat back the trenches for the first time, we found a young Kraut in one of them. He sits with his head down, almost a boy. Total mobilization. He is red-haired, wearing glasses with thick glasses. Myopia is no less than -6. His hands were skinny, his fingers thin. Our boys, seeing such a Fritzik, took pity and gave him bread and a piece of lard. Fritzik ate appetizingly and mumbled something in his German, and I caught one understandable word. Musik. Ich bin Musik! And on top of that, he was showing me with his thin fingers how he played the violin. A violinist, a musician. Meanwhile, the fascists rushed into a counterattack, and despite the fact that our machine gunners were firing hurricane fire, we had to leave these trenches and retreat to the former lines, and we had forgotten about the captured Kraut. What was our surprise when, having taken back the trenches for the second time, we saw the Kraut sitting in the same place. We told him, "Guten Morgen," and he said to us, "Guten Tag," and we see, eyes shining and mouth up to his ears. He's happy for us. Hitler kaputt, Stalin gut, Russ Kamrad gut. Now the Kraut looked cheerful and was very agile. Gesticulating with his hands, he persuasively asked us, "Mein Kommen Russ, General. Schnell, schnell, mein Kommen Russ, General." He wants to tell our command something. We hurriedly sent him to headquarters. And in the evening of the same day, 7 T-34 tanks, brand new, came to our front line, and we saw again our Kraut, who came in the commander's tank. The tankers did not start joking with us, and our Kraut only waved his hand from afar. And when it got dark, the tanks went to the enemy rear. All night we listened and waited. Finally at dawn we heard the clanking of tracks, and soon we saw all 7 of our T-34s, unharmed and unharmed, covered over the armour with strange and unusual figures of German soldiers. In their hands the soldiers held not automatic rifles, but cases with musical instruments. Our red-haired Kraut shone and jumped to the ground first. When I came close to the tanks, I recoiled. Mixed with mud and communication wires between the rollers of the tracks were pressed human hair, cockades with swastikas, epaulettes. And German soldiers, 8 or 10 of them, jumped off each tank, played our Katyusha on harmoniums. Miracles, that's all. I'm not writing a fiction book, where fiction is allowed. I'm just trying to recount what I saw at the front with my own eyes. And it was a limited visibility view from the trench. So, not to lie to me, I did not fully understand then, and now I cannot explain with a guarantee of true what it was. I can only give my guess. Probably it was a military music team, which in the days of heavy fighting fascists scattered in the trenches. I know one thing with certainty. The heroic night raid of 7 T-34 tanks played an important role in further success of our offensive battles near Znamenka. Apparently, the musician gave valuable information to the command. Not without reason, he asked us so convincingly, "Mein Kommen, Russ General." On the assignment of the division command headquarters, the volunteer tankers overnight destroyed several. Hitler's headquarters crushed several dozens of trucks, broke all the ground communication of the fascists, and the red-haired Kraut was not afraid to participate in the heroic raid and show the way to the headquarters. In my opinion, he came to us not out of cowardice, but quite realizing his step. So much for Fritz. There were about 20 kilometers to the town of Znamenka. The fascists took all measures to delay us as long as possible. Our attacks were smothered one after another. A lot of people died in these days, and we could not approach the town of Znamenka. In our battalion, we are losing company commanders. As the battalion's Komsorg, I replace them every day until the arrival of newly appointed from the regimental reserve. It was felt that during this year all our men and boys died in the war. If from the middle of October to the beginning of November 1943, in our division prevailed those called up to the army from Poltava region. Then, by the end of November, Poltavians, our corn crackers, remained in the ranks dozens and units. The war devoured people mercilessly and ruthlessly. In companies, there were always 15-20 people instead of 120. Replenishment came almost every night, but by noon the next day was again a handful of people in each company. One would begin to think that you are really alone alive for now. That day, November 28, 1943, we twice went on the attack and twice were thrown back. There were 5 to 7 riflemen and machine gunners left in the companies. The fascists noticed our small number and decided to counterattack, but first they opened an artillery fire. They hit accurately. Before my eyes the explosions cut off the boulders of our battalion CP, and it seemed that the commander of the Guards Captain Nikolai Mikhailovich Kartoshenko was killed. I rushed along the trench to the heights of the CP. The commander was alive, but he couldn't hear anything. He was concussed. From the command post, of course, the positions are incomparably clearer than from the trench. The commander keeps shouting to the communicator. The latter transmits by phone and listens to what is answered from the regimental headquarters, and from the heights I observe the picture of military operations. And suddenly I notice fascist machine gunners, who under the cover of their artillery fire are moving closer to our trenches before the beginning of the real attack, so that, therefore, to take us by surprise, as soon as the artillery attack is over. After all, they seem to have finished with the heights. And our men, because of the hurricane artillery fire, naturally do not stick their heads out of the trenches. I showed the commander at the Nazi automatic rifleman and ran along the trenches to warn our men about the danger. The companies opened fire on the automatons, we started throwing grenades, and the fascists lay down for the time being. I asked to tell the commander to urgently request ammunition and grenades, which we were running out of. The liaison officer told me by phone that ammunition and reinforcements had been sent to us, and we had to hold out for another 20 or 30 minutes before their arrival. In the regimental headquarters that day, all the workers were mobilised to help us. Each staff worker carried a box of ammunition and grenades. 20 to 30 minutes. A lot. It seems that for the first time I wished that the artillery preparation of the enemy attack lasted longer. Fascist machine gunners still advanced. They are now at the very edge of the artillery bombardment zone. And there is nothing to shoot with. I was looking with my eyes where to find at least one cartridge to shoot the officer, who stuck out of the funnel and waved to his soldiers, beckoning them to him. Behind the trench I saw a rifle with an open bolt, a cartridge in the magazine. I wanted to jump out, but I saw Lieutenant Ivan Yakovlev ahead of me, crawling to the same rifle. I turned away and noticed that the officer had already moved to another funnel, even closer to us. What can I use to take him down? Again I looked back to the place where the rifle was lying, and I saw the killed lieutenant. I jumped out to the rifle too. I grabbed it and rolled into my trench. Now I'm armed and I'm sticking my head out. The officer's waving to his men again. I take aim and shoot. He collapsed and fell into the crater, and his soldiers immediately thought nothing of rising. There was one more cartridge in the rifle. I guess this is really the last one, I thought, knowing very well what it meant. In the corn with his back to me loomed the figure of a Hitlerite. He stood on one knee, turned his head and gesticulated nervously. Also, apparently not an ordinary soldier, I will not spare my last cartridge for this. I take him in my sights and shoot. I don't know at that moment that this is my last shot in the war. I don't know that for me, a mortar man, my stay on 4 active fronts of the great patriotic war will fit in the interval between 2 shots from a rifle. That, as well as my first shot, near Kletskaya, November 6, 1942, and the last one, near Znamenka, November 28, 1943, I will make not from a mortar, but from a semi-automatic rifle, SVT. The black figure of the Hitlerite, who was kneeling, swayed and fell forward, crumpling dry cornstalks. Now the artillery preparation will end and the Nazis will rush to our trenches. To sit in a trench unarmed is suicide. Where are the reinforcements? The reinforcements have already arrived. I see the staff clerk, Petty Officer Nosov, who is running towards me with a box on his shoulder. This petty officer was always with Commissar Igorov. A military man, he could replace a machine gunner, an armoured fighter, a signalman and a sapper in a moment of need. He knew military equipment well. In addition, Petty Officer Nosov had a higher legal education and experience of party work. He knew how to draw up documents perfectly. It was Petty Officer Nosov, on behalf of the Commissar, introduced me to the course of my duties as Comsorg 4 months ago. Our regimental clerk is running well, and most importantly, on time. I waved at him. He didn't notice me. I jumped out and rushed to him across the open ground to grab my ammunition. At that moment, a large caliber shell bursts from behind with a terrible crack. I felt that I was lifted into the air and thrown to one side and my left leg to the other. And I realized that my leg was torn off from the root at the very belly, together with the buttock. While I was falling down, my mind flashed through the fragmented, "You can't even put a tourniquet on it." There was not a centimetre of the leg. I'll lose a lot of blood, and it's over. My intestines won't hold on. I'd rather be killed. Hey, Mansur, you were wounded in a bad way. Barely landed, I felt my leg in place. My thigh is slippery, covered in blood, but it's still there. Why can't I feel my leg? It turns out that a shell fragment severed my left sciatic nerve. I learned this myself only much later in the hospital. That people have sciatic nerves, that damaged nerves stop working, and then my leg hangs like a rag. And meanwhile I am lying on the ground near a huge smoking funnel, in which you can lower and hide the camp kitchen, and the thought occupies me only one: how I, if we do not repel this attack, not to be at the Hitlerites in the rear. The body itself came into motion. I crawled, dragging behind me a dead leg with a full boot of blood. The leg is heavy. Involuntarily remembered the soldier at Stalingrad, who himself cut off his leg as an extra load. But I'm not so much in pain as afraid, as if not to be taken prisoner by the Germans. Someone stops and helps me to stand up. It's Lieutenant Tarasov Alexei. His left hand is broken. I hugged him by the neck, jumped on my right one, and he and I, on 3 legs, nimbly began to move away in the direction of our rear. The boot from my left foot was lost, and I didn't even notice where or when it happened. My foot had no feeling at all. On a mown wheat field, we were overtaken by 2 wagons with riders, in one of which I recognized an old battle friend from the Battle of Stalingrad, the same Moiseyev, the father of 7 daughters, with whom we forced the Vorskla. Moiseyev told us that the German counterattack had collapsed. Almost unbelievable, but fate again brought me together with this man, and again my horse helps me to escape. Moiseyev unloaded his wagon, threw a thick layer of wheat straw in it. Tarasov and I lay down on this bed, and our wagon rushed to the Dnieper. We arrived in the dark. The traffic through the pontoon bridge was one way, from the left to the right bank, and back was ferried only by boats and launches, and only wounded. Here we said goodbye to Moiseyev, and I never saw him again. On the left bank, trucks with straw bedding in their bodies were waiting for us. The chauffeurs were in a hurry to load up before dawn and leave as far away from the Dnieper as possible, because during the day the fascists started bombing here. At last, our car, having entered the road, ran to the east. The road was all broken, one funnel on another, and the car is running without slowing down. The chauffeur is in a hurry to get away as far as possible, further from the bombing, from the war. We rattle like firewood in the back, but we endure it. We are no longer afraid of this crazy shaking just to get to the Sandbat. The driver made a short stop and looked in at us. Be patient, brothers. I know that it's bad for you in the back of the truck, but we have to get away from the Dnieper before dawn, 100 to 150 kilometers. There are sanitary units there, and the fascists don't fly there. Be patient for the sake of your own salvation. And again the car rushed, jumping and wiggling. It was hard for chauffeurs in the war, too. We arrived at the Sandbat. We were loaded on stretchers, put on the hard ground. The chauffeur said goodbye. He had to load himself with shells, ammunition, and back to the Dnieper again. And we were carried to the operating tables, which were set up in tarpaulin tents. The surgeon warned that there would be no anesthesia. Everyone would be operated on alive. The surgeon stood in front of me in a white coat splattered with blood, drops of blood on his cap, on his mask, and on his chest. His strong hands looked like those of a miner or an artilleryman. I was laid belly down on the operating table and quickly bandaged my arms and legs to the table. The surgeon reassured me that the buttock, where he would perform the operation, was a place in a person that did not require any caution from the surgeon. And this place can be cut without any danger to life. It'll hurt, but it won't be fatal. You lie still and don't disturb my work. Understand? I'm lying there thinking that the surgeon is right. Well, what is it, the buttock? The soft spot of a human being. I'm hiding my head in a pile of absorbent cotton. If I scream, I'll scream in absorbent cotton. It seemed that the surgeon did not cut, but pulled and tore apart my body to get the deep-seated splinter. I was screaming a lot, like I'd yelled 100 times when we'd rushed to the attack. You yelled to suppress your own fear and to frighten the Krauts. When you yell, you make yourself braver and more frightened in front of the enemy. And now I was yelling to drown out the terrible pain in my body, which was being torn apart by a surgeon's knife. And the surgeon didn't stop me from screaming. It's more important to him that I'm not jumping around on the operating table. And my deafening roar didn't bother him. In war, everyone understands each other without words. The searing pain became common and even. Then came the sound of shrapnel falling into my pelvis. Then the mosquito bites of a needle. Then the bandaging with a wide bandage. This is no longer a surgeon. I felt the girl's hands, with all the nerves of my pain-stricken body, caught the kind touch of fingers that belonged to no one. And only my imagination drew a divine image of a blonde beauty. I couldn't see her because I was face down. And on the stretcher I was lying in the same way, and therefore did not see the one who touched my heart first. In the morning we were loaded again in the back of the truck and transported to the field hospital, in the district village of Novye Sanjari. I don't remember the number of the evacuation hospital in Novye Sanjari between Poltava and Kremenchug. But I remember the first bathhouse. The bathhouse was organised with the help of local residents, old men, women and children. All able-bodied Novi Sanjari residents came to help the medical staff of the hospital in this difficult and very labour-intensive work, to wash trench soldiers with severe wounds. All soldiers coming here are very dirty, overgrown. Here they are washed, trimmed, and the soldier will be like an infant, clean, caressed, fed. This bathhouse is not a bathhouse at all, but some kind of office or elementary school. People are constantly fetching water from somewhere. From the Vorskla, young and strong, on troughs, a string of them, like ants. In the courtyard, over huge fires, in huge cauldrons and in iron barrels, water is warming. The hot water is carried into the room where iron stoves are heated to warm the air. Everywhere the room is furnished with tables, benches, beds, covered with white sheets, and on them lie wounded soldiers, naked, in what their mothers were born. Women, old men, girls are bustling around the soldiers, deftly soaping the soldiers' bodies with huge washcloths and rubbing without any shyness. And the soldier lies there, blissful, though his wound hurts, though the stump of his leg sticks out like a stump. The soldier is both tickled and hurt. The soldier does not know what he should react to, either to the pain or to the tickle from the washcloth and from women's hands. The women are in a hurry. They wash, rinse, wash again. It is necessary to manage this work as soon as possible. But the soldiers ask tearfully to be washed again and again. Their bodies miss soap, water, bath. What happiness, eh? A soldier is happy as a child in this bathhouse. The soldiers stare at the women washerwomen. It's been years since some of them have seen a woman's face. The washerwomen wash the soldiers' heads first so that they would not stare at them with their greedy and begging eyes. But the soldier, enduring the corrosive, stinking soap, still looks at the female figure with wide-open eyes. And the women slap the soap foam on his eyes. Shobin Ibachiv! The soldier shakes his head, throws off the foam and stares at his eyes again. Dear women, how beautiful and dear you were to us then in that bathhouse in Novye Sanjari. There were no ugly ones among you then. All beautiful, every single one of you. You wore white robes. Your beautiful body was visible through the thin, wet cloth. I've never seen such beauty before or since. I declare, the most beautiful women lived and live in Novye Sanjari. And you were soaping our eyes so we wouldn't ne bachila. I was lying face down on a bench in that bathhouse and could bachil only bare feet of the women washers. I admired the bare feet, but the rest I could see only thanks to my imagination. Here are the feet of a young woman. They look like the feet of a child. And these are already a little deformed from walking. This woman is about 30 years old. But what's she like? Very good, I guess. Here's a girl my age. I wish I could see her, but I can't see her lying on my stomach. I've been unlucky all my life. I've only been wounded and not in the wrong way. Lie there and look at the floorboards. There's a soldier lying upside down on a bed next to me. He's having a good time. He's seen all the women, and he's lying there, smiling, content. They couldn't even put soap on his eyes. He says that he is not afraid of soap, that soap does not affect his eyes. And for some reason there are only old women washing his eyes. Girls and young women scattered. They run away and laugh shrilly and joyfully. And the soldier is smiling. The soldier is handsome and about 40 years old. Only one leg is missing and his arm is bandaged. And he's happy that he's alive, that women ran away from him. And what about the old ladies? The old ladies are happy that God is still there. He left a tough man for the divorce of mankind. Our dear little soldier, our dear father, They wail a joyful prayer, and the soldier does not grieve that the young ladies ran away. They ran away now. When my wounds heal, they'll come running. They will run away themselves. The soldier smiles. Life goes on. I lie there and think, they washed me, rinsed me, they put on clean underwear, a shirt and underpants. They carried me to the hospital building, to the officer's ward, because I was recently promoted to the rank of junior lieutenant. After the bath, I fell into a dead sleep, drowning in bliss, the likes of which I have never experienced again. I slept for over 24 hours. Then I woke up hungry. I ate and went back to sleep. For the first 2 weeks, I only slept and never dreamed. When I had enough sleep, I began to learn to walk on crutches, to look for my guys from the regiment and battalion in wards and buildings. Our machine gunner Vasily Shamrai saw me first and shouted joyfully and loudly, "Komsorg! Our Komsorg! Can you feel it, boys? It's our Komsorg! Hey, Bo, our Komsorg!" He put 3 battle orders on his shirt for everyone to see and spins heroically on his bed. Skinny but loud. I came every day to see my friend Vasya Shamraya, as he was without a leg. Pointing at me, Vasya Shamrai would say to his friends in the ward, "Try to find out from our Komsomol leader about the island of Smarty. He will tell you himself if you don't see me." Vasya Shamrai grieved only one thing. He was sad that there was no writer to tell the truth about Smarty Island. I could only tell him in consolation that someone would write after the war about our island and other cruel battles. 35 years after the victory, we will meet with Vasily Kuzmich Shamray, and he will ask me, "Has anyone written about the Smarty Island?" "No," I will answer, "no one has written. I myself will wait for a long time, hoping that one of our comrades in arms will write, 'I knew one of our battalion mortarman Bartoshevich Eduard from Omsk. He could probably write a book about all of us.' But he died. I myself will think, I wish a writer were in my place. How much material. I see a lot of amazing things around me, both bad surprising and good surprising. I see a lot of beauty unspeakable. I've lived and felt a lot of things, the war and the mine. Tried everything, and loved, and was loved. I am bursting with impressions that no one knows about but me. I want to give them to a real writer to write about us. But working after the war, as well as before the war, in the mines, at the mines, I have never met a writer on my life path, just to meet him face to face, but to know that it would be interesting for him to listen to all this, as about myself, starting from the first shot near Kletskaya and ending with hospitals, which are also an integral part of the war. And my friend Shamrai Vasya, Vasily Kuzmich, at our new meeting in Kremenchug in December 1981, again his own. "Nay napisav chekto?" And he looked inquisitively into my eyes. I guessed what he was saying to me silently, but I did not dare to give him my secret that I started to write a book about us, the Guards. Because there's no telling if it'll work. A cat with a bell can't catch the stupidest mouse. With premature ringing, I'm afraid to spook, to jinx my dream. I'm too late. I'm in a hurry. My memory's still pretty good. By the way, it's a strange thing. Memory, selective. Picture, for example, remember in detail, remember the sounds, smells, and, interestingly enough, the thoughts that at that moment thought remember. But you forget the name of the place, or you pronounce it wrong, or the wrong date. So you crawl on the most detailed map, write to your friends to remember. But in the end, you restore everything, where and when it was. Exactly. I can handle it. But here is what is harder, because everything I write about, I have to live through again, and I have from this again began to hurt my heart. Will I be able to finish this book? Will Shamrai Vasya read it? He also complained to me about his heart. It's like an awl in my heart. I'm also embarrassed that I mostly write about myself. It's not from immodesty, but I can write down the soldier's diary, as it is in me, only through my own feelings. I am comforted by the hope that maybe my fellow guardsmen and frontline soldiers will recognize in this description both themselves and their feelings in those days. In Novye Sanjari, in the field hospital, I stayed not long, a month. My sciatic nerve was not restored, my leg continued to be inactive, and the sanitary train rushed me to the stationary hospital in Pavlovo on Oka. Pavlovo na Oke is already deep in our rear. I was placed in a ward with 17 beds. One of them was waiting for me. The former owner of this bed died during a heavy operation. Although I was not averse to superstition, I had my own judgment for all occasions. On this occasion I said to myself, no two shells in a row fall into the same funnel. And I was also sure that it was impossible to die from my wound, only if you tried very hard. My bunk is in the corner. Next to me lies Azerbaijani Yaroliev. He has a wound in the knee. There are two from my division in the ward, but I didn't know them. Another one from the 13th Division of our 32nd Corps, but he was wounded before the operation on the Island of Death. My friend Sashka Kolesnikov, he also did not know. I told about that island in the ward several times, and after my story everyone was always silent for a long time. The operation on the Island of Death, in October 1943, near the village of Vlasovka, near Kremenchuk, on the island of the Guards' Glory, where the guards of the 32nd Rifle Corps died, was one of the most impressive examples of mass heroism and self-sacrifice for the sake of our common victory. We lived in the ward as a friendly family, helping each other in everything. We were fed from a spoon, if necessary. Duck served, taught to walk. We remembered a lot. And not only about the war. Sometimes the nurses flew into our room frightened at the noise, caught fire and flew back. I was bandaged by Nurse Alla, fiery red hair, big blue eyes with butterfly lashes, and golden flakes of freckles over blush on white skin. Hands smooth and white and freckled too. She knew my bandage was always slipping off. She'd come to my bed in the morning and evening and take the blanket off my back. I can see her beautiful face in the back of my head, and I'm afraid that now she's going to realize it, get scared and leave without giving me a bandage. I freeze. But my heart beats like a heavy hammer. And Alla, not paying attention to anything, leisurely finishes dressing. Then she covers my back with a blanket and leaves quietly. I lie down after this procedure, not daring to lift my flaming and heavy head. Half an hour later, I turn on my side, and I see Yaroliev whispering to me, "If I were you, Mansur, I would die instantly. But you're alive. Why are you so strong? She is the most beautiful and the most tender girl. She loves you." Everyone in the ward was jealous that Allah cared for me more than for others. But I didn't dare look her in the eye, and it's all my fault that my wound is in such a place. If my wound were on my arm, or even on my leg, or my head. Of course, I was ashamed of being such a prude. I was afraid of a maiden's eyes, and I was drawn to them so strongly that I cried in despair. How many secret tears I shed then, in that ward, with my face on the pillow. And then I had a new concern. My healed wound opened up. It turned out to be another splinter. A few days later, Allah took me on a gurney to the operating room. The surgeon looked at my miner's figure with an appraising eye and said, "Prepare for spinal anesthesia." The nurses asked me to bend as low as possible, even lower, even lower. I was bent in an arc as low as I could go. They fixed me in this position with bandages and pressed me down with their bodies, gently urging me not to move. It is difficult for me to sit in this bent position, and I would like to straighten up for a moment, but these women are cunning. Their affectionate words, "Be patient, my dear. Be patient, darling. We're doing better for you," really calmed me down, and I was willing to endure anything. Allah is also beside me. I see the edge of her robe, the hand in which I clung with a dead grip. She, poor thing, endures. With a crunch, they pierced my back between the separated vertebrae with a needle peak, and the lower part of my body went numb. I remembered how in the sandbat they pulled out a splinter alive. and I did not know and could not understand where it was easier for me, then or now. But now I didn't hear the pain, and the spinal injection was very hard to bear. I didn't see that first shrapnel in the sandbat, but this one seemed small to me. Probably due to this, and penetrated deep into the body, I looked at it, a small fragment from the iron product called shell. To think that it was invented and manufactured in a factory, it was designed to penetrate the human body, and clever, civilized people puzzled over how to design it so that it would penetrate deeper. Yes, millions of years ago, we humans lived in caves and ate raw meat from wild animals. We're very different from those cavemen now, and millions of years from now, we'll be just as different from what we are now. This was told to the soldiers on the last day of his life by our part-torg of the battalion, Guards Senior Lieutenant Petr Vasilyev. Probably he believed that we would differ from our present selves in a good way. With this belief he died from such a piece of iron, specially made by human hands. Our hospital was visited once a week by chiefs, residents of Pavlov on Oka, women and children. The chiefs shared with us their rare joys and very frequent sorrows. Their fathers, husbands, sons died at the front or were hospitalized in another city. The chiefs grieved, and we grieved with them. They would bring us some treats, knowing that their fathers, husbands, sons would also be visited in another city, and they spoiled us with amateur concerts. Many of our soldiers, who were discharged from the army on disability, stayed to live and work in Pavlov. The town was small, tidy, handyman. There was plenty of work. They stayed, got married, and were happy. Once among the chiefs I saw a girl. Everything inside me broke off and turned upside down. While she was in our ward, her eyes stopped on me several times. I looked at her and with my eyes told her that I had been searching for her all my life. She understood me and responded in roughly the same way. I was sure that she would approach me, if not today, then next time for sure. And late in the evening in our ward, a fight broke out. Turns out that girl with the wheat hair had hurt everyone's feelings. They said her eyes were even bluer than our Allah's. They said her skin was unusually white, smooth, but not shiny, but matte, delicate. I was silently jealous of these conversations lying there, tormented. Two faces stood before me, Allah's and this girl chef's. Which of them should I choose? I love them both. My heart was pounding anxiously and was torn in two. Grief came to me completely unexpected. I am a little cold only because I have not yet confessed my love to them. Perhaps they don't like me at all, and I don't know which one to choose. You're a fool, Mansur. At this I calmed down, but I only fell asleep in the morning. Allah came to our room in the morning frowning. She took everyone's temperature, wrote it down and left without even looking at me. Then she came again and adjusted my bandage a little. I wanted to leave, but still could not resist, and said that a girl from the chiefs asked me who I was, where I was from, and whether I was married. Allah looked at me point blank. She looked at me questioningly, and I averted my eyes. She left quietly. I felt sick to my stomach. Why did I have to suffer such tortures and executions in a clean bed deep in the rear? My insides are burning with worry, worse than at the front. Why did Allah enter me first and then this girl? Why didn't she come to me first? I would have had her alone, and I wouldn't have needed anyone else. Finally, a week later, it was visitation day again. The chefs brought us pickled pears, cranberries. A girl with wheat hair comes in and stares at me from the doorway. I don't know how to behave now. I can't break up with Allah. Allah was not on duty that night, but she was present, invisible to no one but me. And the girl chef gently dismissed my imaginary Allah and approached me. Allah dissolved and disappeared altogether. Mansur, hello. My name is Ludmilla. Are you happy to see me? I've been thinking about you all week. She was worried and talked, and I listened and did not believe my ears and only blinked my dumb eyes. Ludmilla whispered to me about herself, about the city, about the Oka. My head was spinning. I learned that Luda works at the hospital in the intendant's department, that she had already written 10 applications to the municipal military enlistment office to send her to the front, but she must first finish the nursing course. She had 3 months left to study. I didn't want her to leave. I was afraid of losing Ludmila from that very minute. In the ward we squealed from such an unexpected turn of events. She was promoted to anyone but not me. And I was waiting for the 3rd operation. The chief female doctor explained its purpose to me. It is now necessary to sew the sciatic nerve, which is cut by the shrapnel. The nerve will not be conductive yet, but that's the way it's supposed to be. And again they took me to the operating room. Both Alla and Ludmila took me. Ludmila did not enter the operating room, but stayed in the corridor. She winked at me and smiled. Alla did not leave me. And again I felt a pain in my chest. Whom do I love? Again they twisted, bent, piled on. This time they could not get the needle in the right place for a long time, and I had to endure several injections, until finally the lower part of my body was numb. Then the effect of anesthesia ended, and the operation continued. I could not yell. Alla was at the headboard. Ludmila was at the door. So I was worse this time. All in all, they put 50 stitches on the wound. Ludmila was waiting for me in the corridor. I blinked at her and gave her a thumbs up. Everything was fine. She came to my room every day, practicing on me. Putting a bandage on my arm, leg, head or chest, she laughed, joked, and I was ready to play the role of a mannequin around the clock. I felt a chill blow between me and my friends. And there is nothing good in Ludmila. She can't be a mistress and a mother. She's too beautiful, you can't build a house with her. Mansur, you shouldn't fill your head with Lyudmila. She's fit to marry a general. And who are you? A junior lieutenant for 5 minutes? That's how everyone was thinking, except my Azeri neighbour. Yaroliev envied me in a good way and was proud of me. He used to put his thumb to his hunchbacked nose, and with the rest, spread out, he used to twist and tease everyone. And one elderly officer, who had been silent for a long time, said this: I knew that Ludmila would become friends with Mansur. Women like men who are modest and honest. And what are you now? Peekaboo roo 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 roo. Hunters of adventures in love. He made everyone laugh with his moralizing tone. And me too. By this time I'd already realized that the boys were just getting their spirits back after the horrors of the front. That in the stories of Pikirchiki, more mischievous fiction than truth, and of course everyone in his heart dreams of the only one. I used to sing in the hospital too, and when, sometimes, I drew a portrait of a girl, which is so similar and a bit prettier, then the consequence of it all was to be in love to the grave. I drew portraits of all my friends in the ward and thereby destroyed the coldness that had arisen in our relations. I became known among them as a good artist. Keep me my talisman. I knew by some unfathomable instinct that my destiny was waiting for me at home. I didn't know her name yet, I didn't know what kind of eyes she had, but I knew she was out there somewhere. The only one that I would recognize immediately, that I would not confuse with anyone. It was April 1944. For those 5 months that I was in hospitals, our troops had completely liberated the right bank Ukraine. The battles were now for the final liberation of our homeland from Hitler's invaders. We're about to chase, and we're already starting to chase, the enemy into his own territory. Who is the Komsorg in our battalion now? I thought, with a jealous feeling. To whom after me the commissar of the regiment said these burning words: The life of a Komsorg lasts on average from 1 attack to 2 or 3. Is the commissar himself alive? Who else is still alive among our clones? The doctors wouldn't even talk to me about my return to the front. The medical commission dismissed me from the army as a 3rd-grade invalid. They finally took off the label from my wound, and I saw scars 20 by 14 centimetres along and across. The stigma was visible. The brand of war. From the day when Kolya Konyaev, Ivan Vanshin and Viktor Karpov and I, together with Kolya Konyaev, Ivan Vanshin and Viktor Karpov, had achieved from under armour to be sent to the front, and I left Brichmala for the Tashkent Infantry School. Almost 2 years had passed. Is it really only 2? It seems that I've lived a whole separate life. I fought on 4 active fronts: Stalingrad, Kursk-Bulja, the Battle of the Dnieper, left bank Ukraine, right bank Ukraine. But something still kept me from returning home. More and more often I remembered in detail the day when I was accepted into the party. It was in the cold November of the 42nd, when in the Stalingrad steppes, swept away by snowstorms, it was decided whether to be a turning point in the war in favour of the USSR or not. In the trenches, word of mouth spread the stunning news. A brigade of political workers had arrived at our front line to enlist in the ranks of the All-Union Communist Party. All the most fair, the brightest things in my life I associated with the party. In my imagination, such a momentous event had to take place in some marvellous building flooded with sunshine. And here, earth holes at the bottom of the trenches, where we, grimy and covered with mud, escape from snowstorms and cold in the short breaks between battles. I confess that at the first minute flashed regret that my long-cherished dream is destined to be realised in such a non-touristy environment. But, as it turns out, the political commanders took into account this psychological moment. A brigade of 3 or 4 men of the command staff, clerks and a photographer, armed, like us, with automatic rifles, grenades, pistols, and every minute ready, like us, to take the fight, did everything to create for the trench soldiers entering the party an elevated, festive mood. They were immaculately shaved and trim, and with their whole appearance they told us that despite the hardships of trench life, in spite of everything, our entry into the party would be realised in the most solemn atmosphere. In their briefcases and field bags they had everything necessary to start the registration procedure immediately in any trench. Business-like and without unnecessary words, they fill in our questionnaires. We take clean sheets for applications from the stack. And how to write? We ask, sure that there is a certain form for applications. But the politodeltsi say, write as your heart tells you. And so everyone turned away from everyone and thought about his sheet. The heart tells you many things. There is anger at the invaders of our land, and the pain of remembering yesterday's battle in which a friend died, and the desire to fight in the first ranks for the liberation of the motherland, and if I die, then as a communist, and a passionate dream of a better future for all our multinational Soviet people, and everything that prompts the soldier's heart, finally powered out in 4 intimate words, please be accepted into the ranks of the All-Union Communist Party. This is how millions of frontline applications were written. And to the soldier who wrote these words, it seemed that he expressed with them everything that had accumulated in his soul. Do I have the right to go home from the hospital if the enemy is not yet finally broken? Up to now my actions were guided by the concrete front situation, orders of commanders. Perhaps for the first time I had to check my actions with the conscience of a communist. And perhaps for the first time I felt with such clear clarity that my life was forever divided by a firm line. Before that moment and after, when with fingers frozen in the cold, I wrote out 4 words. Please be accepted into the ranks of the All-Union Communist Party of Communists. I know, I was told, that I was a common type of Soviet man. Indeed, very many of our soldiers, after being discharged from the reserve, asked to go back to the front until the war was over. And I am glad that I belong to this common type, and not to another. But there is one quality in me, which I am tormented by, which I cannot cope with myself, some kind of heightened conscientiousness. Even after the island of death on the Dnieper, I was conscious that I stayed alive there, where almost everyone died. And now. The doctors said, go home. Even my wise old man, who is always vigilantly guarding in the depths of my soul, says to me, I can, Mansur. You've fought your fair share. Come home while you're still in one piece. Your Stalingrad alone is worth a lot. But I can walk on both legs and without a stick, and the war is not over yet. And one more thing. Intuitively, I already guessed then that no matter how my life would turn out in the future, no matter how many wonderful people it would bring me together with, I would never have such human friendship as I had at the front under fire. Many years later, my wife and I will be travelling together, in a hurry to get somewhere, and we will see a cow that has just calved in a deserted place. The calf is wet, the cow's afterbirth has not yet fallen out, and there is not a soul around. Naturally, we go back to inform the cattle breeders about the calved cow. It will turn out that they have lost the cow, they are looking for it, they will thank us fervently for finding it, and one of the cattle breeders will say, "Don't you see that it's a Zaporozhets? The owner is a front-line soldier. On Zhiguli would not go to us for 25 kilometers because of the cow." And I will be pleased in front of my wife that people still have a high opinion of us, the front-line soldiers, after so many years. It's a fair opinion. As far as I notice, the front-line soldiers retained something special in their human nature, a special responsiveness, the ability to understand the circumstances of another person as their own. All my life I will dream of meeting Sashka Kolesnikov from the 13th Guards Division of our 32nd Guards Rifle Corps. I saved him when we were sailing across the Dnieper under artillery bombardment, and without him I would have been lost on the island of death. Is he still alive? I do not know his patronymic, place, or exact year of his birth. I guessed that the happiest of us would be those who together would reach the very end of the war, to the victory day, and not fall behind somewhere halfway in sandbats and hospitals. In general, I asked the hospital authorities to issue me a ticket through Moscow. In Moscow, I found the main political department of the Army and Navy. It took a long time to get a pass. I was not given a pass, but on the internal phone connected with Major Avramenko. I briefly told him about myself and asked him to send me to the front to my native division. The major answered me roughly like this: "We do not take invalids into the active army yet. There is no need. I advise you to go home and quickly get involved in work at the mine, because in the rear you have to work hard and help the front. I wish you success in your labour." And the voice in the tube went silent. I must admit that I breathed a sigh of relief. After all, if our situation at the fronts was not as good as the newspapers and radio reported, a major from the political department of the army would not refuse an extra mortar gunner. Vaughan at the Germans. Total mobilization. Now my damned conscientiousness could be absolutely calm. The war was over for me, and I should return to my mine as soon as possible. In Moscow there were April puddles, but the main spring was waiting for me at home. I went to Kazansky railway station to catch the Tashkent passenger train. There was no train to Tashkent, so I took the first one I could find, as long as it was to Kuibyshev. In a day and a half I entered the station building in Kuibyshev. The people were crowded, a lot of children, and all hungry. I untied my duffel bag. The children swarmed over me like pigeons, all skinny, skin and bones, big eyes. And what struck me was that there were dozens of them, and they patiently, without fuss, without pressure, in a queue, each getting his own portion. In short, I got on the Tashkent train with an empty bag, without a single protolon, and if it were not for the passengers who treated me with their last piece of food, I would have been miserable for 3 days to Tashkent. In Tashkent, I took another train to the city of Churchik, and further I had to get by hitchhikers to Brishmula Kishlak, which is located in the upper reaches of Chatkal, at the foothills of Chimchan and Tien Shan. My father moved us to this Kishlak from Altai shortly before the war to, as he said, feed us with apples and grapes. Arsenic ore is mined there, and up the Chatkal River at the Sargadon mine they also mined tungsten ore. From there I went to the front. My relatives, my mother and 2 brothers, are waiting for me there. The youngest is 5 years old. I can see in advance how happy he will be. Of course he will be. His older brother has returned from the war. How he will tell me later on, the street, in Russian, in Uzbek, in Tatar and in Tajik, what a hero his older brother Mansur is. That Mansur killed 100 or 1,000 fascists. I climbed into the back of a Zis truck full of Uzbek and Tajik women. They gave me a place by the cab. I look at the passengers and they look at me. Curious. Uzbek and Tajik women can't wait to know who I am, where I come from, to whom my son or brother is returning from the war. To Brishmullah. I shout my favourite word to them and start speaking Uzbek and Tatar. Their black eyebrows fly up in surprise. Why, it's Mansur. Uzbek and Tajik women, like magpies, began to remember me. Kolya Konyev, Viktor Karpov, Vanshin Ivan, 4 friends who 2 years ago managed to go to the front from under armour. Finally, having talked enough, the girls told me that Nikolai Konyev received a vacation, that General Chernyakhovsky himself let him go for a month for the performance of some very important task, and Kolya is now a guest at home in Brishmullah. Hearing such news, I rejoiced so much that even I thought it could not be true. After almost 2 years of such vicissitudes in our life, fate would give us this meeting. She didn't. The car is rushing, raising a high plume of road dust. Here we passed Kojikent, here is Charvak behind. We jumped out on a flat terrace, and down below Chatkal is booming frantically. The same Zis is coming towards us, also packed with passengers in colourful dresses, and among them a figure in a military flying uniform. It's Kolya. The cars are on a par for a moment, and I, recognising Nikolai, shout to him, "Kolya, it's me, Mansur." Nikolai also saw me and shouted something to me. Both of us are rapidly taken away by Zis in opposite directions, me to Brishmullah and him to the war. Though everything was covered with dust, but we waved to each other for a long time, he with his cap, I with my cap. I'll never see him again. In May of the 44th, I would already start working at the mine. A funeral for Kolya would come to the Konyev family, and I, in the family of a friend, will find the only one, which my soul felt, my hope. But this story is for another tale. Meanwhile, I will come to the same Bostandik District Military Enlistment Office, where almost 2 years ago I banged my fists, demanding to be sent to the front. I will sit, it seems, on the same chair against the same Major Galkin, and Major Galkin will look at me with great curiosity for a long time, until finally he will say, "Well, tell me,